Okay, I guess we should start to stick to the schedule so the others will join us when they can. So, Professor Varum, nice to have you in the line with the other presenters that we had during the past years since we were established. And it is our great pleasure to hear your presentation today. So I'll be quick with the introduction because your CV tells for itself. So Professor Varum is a full professor at the Civil Engineering and Georesources Department of the Faculty of Engineering at the University of Porto. And he's an integrated member of the Construct Research Unit, which is the Institute of the Research and Development in Structures and Construction. He has been seconded national expert to the ELSA laboratory and Joint Research Center from the European Commission in Italy in the period between July 2009 to August 2010. Since 2023, he has served as the president of the Directorate of the Institute for Sustainable Construction at the University of Porto. He was a member of the project team 2 for the development of the second generation of Eurocodes. He is a member of the National Committee of the International Council on Monuments and Sites since 2009 and expert member of the ICOMOS International Scientific Committee of Earth and Architectural Heritage. He has participated to post-earthquake field reconnaissance missions, in particular in Italy, Spain, Nepal, and Mexico. His main research interests include assessment, strengthening, and repair of structures, earthquake engineering, historic constructions, conservation, and strengthening. So I believe that we have a perfect presenter for today's topic, which is the seismic performance of RC buildings, field lesson standards, and research needs. So, Professor, the Zoom floor is yours, and we're looking forward to hear you.
Thank you, Vladimir. Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to start addressing my greetings to the colleagues Vladimir Bukobratovic and Marko Marinkovic for the invitation and for all the arrangements for this lecture of today. And in your name, I would like to extend my compliments to all the participants in this session, members of your National Association of Earthquake Engineering, but eventually also other students or participants that has joined us in this session. So, thank you for the kind introduction. As I have already discussed it previously with you, my lecture of today is a lecture that I have already given in other places, in other forums, but in any case, I believe that it could be useful to share with you some thoughts and some lessons that you have been learning all over the world with the interactions that the earthquake engineering community has been developing, visiting the sites affected by earthquakes, also with the collaborative research projects and with other also technical interactions. So the lecture of today is centered on the seismic behavior and performance of current reinforced concrete buildings. And as said in the introduction, I will be sharing my time talking about field lessons, what are the lessons that we have learned in the recent earthquakes, also commenting briefly the evolution of the standards, and eventually leaving here open to the audience some suggestions for eventually future research developments. It is important to highlight that during my presentation, I will leave some comments, ideas, and eventually also some provocations. And it is essential and very important to say that the message that I would like to pass should be interpreted as applied to current buildings, buildings of current use, buildings typically of importance class 2, according to our Eurocode 8, and also buildings with mid-rise. So the lessons and the message that I would like to share with you are based and centered on this type of very common buildings. Um, in my lecture, so apart from a brief introduction and some general comments to better frame my talk, I will give importance to three main pillars in my presentation. First one will be the lessons learned from recent earthquakes. The second one is focus on the structural irregularities of buildings. And the third one will be discussing the importance and the effect of infills in the seismic response and performance of our buildings. And depending on the time, eventually, if you have time, I will leave I will conclude with some final comments within this lecture. So allow me please to share with you some questions that we put to ourselves in our research group, and somehow those questions are the basic motivation for the work that we are doing in our research and also in our technical activities. So the first provocation or question is basically this one: do you really know everything about the seismic response of these common building structures? The second question that you should put to ourselves every day is that, do you really have regular building structures? In another direction, even if you recognize that our codes have evolved a lot, those are our international codes and national codes are adequate for the assessment and design of irregular building structures. In another direction, are you really dealing well with the influence of infill masonry walls in the response and performance assessment of our buildings? In another direction, we should recognize that the codes that you are using nowadays in supporting of design and assessment has evolved a lot and reflects the state of the art of the knowledge in many points. But the question that you should put to ourselves is how to deal with the risk associated to our existing building stock. And finally, we should recognize that in the evolution of the cost of the design practice and on the development of new solutions for construction, we have assisted and you are assisting to the introduction of new materials and solutions in the buildings construction, and essentially and mainly in the building envelope. And so the question that we should put to ourselves is that how those solutions in those new buildings or on the retrofitted buildings will behave in future earthquakes. Regarding the evolution of seismic design codes, we should recognize that the seismic design codes are baby-borns. In fact, just in the first half of last century, we start having some very simple documents, or at least concerns on the seismic design. But it was in the second half of the last century, and especially in the last decades of that century, that we assisted to an important evolution of our codes worldwide. And also in this century, in the first 2 decades, we have assisted to a continuous and important evolution of our codes. In fact, we are assisting to a continuous evolution of our seismic design codes all over the world due to different reasons. First, we have a dense monitoring of the seismic activity in the world, so we are somehow with time knowing better and better the seismic demand. In other direction, how has the information quickly spread and how easy it is having contact of the engineering community and of the scientific community with the regions affected by earthquakes, we are learning a lot in these earthquakes. And so those lessons end up also influencing the evolution of the codes. In another direction, we have to recognize that all over the world, our laboratories, our universities are equipped with better conditions to study full-scale or large-scale structural components or even the full structures. So all the investment you're doing in research at the end that creates output, scientific output, has papers, PhDs, but also many of this information is somehow creating information and knowledge that again give us conditions to keep the evolution of our codes. And then even if you recognize that you do not live in a perfect world, there is a tendency of a growing concern of our society and also of our policymakers in terms of the risks, in particular on the seismic risk. Actually, this is the actual distribution of the countries that had adopted or that are in the process of adoption or even eventually of negotiation for eventually adopting the Eurocodes as a set, or eventually some parts of the Eurocodes. And so the Eurocodes are in fact becoming more and more one of the more relevant standard for the structural design, in particular also for the seismic design. In fact, the dream of obtaining a set of standards that will support the design of our structures started in the 70s, 80s. It was a long journey, but the first publication of the Eurocodes was concluded in 2007, and in 2008 the countries, some limited number of countries, starting adopting the Eurocodes. Nowadays, those Eurocodes have been adopted and will keep being adopted by an increasing number of countries, and has the case of Portugal, my country, have adopted only in 2019, but we are now fully using all the Eurocodes that are published. As you may be aware, we have been starting a few years ago on the drafting of a second generation of Eurocodes, and you hope that in the near future we'll have the second generation finally approved, and in order to start the process of adoption by the countries that are using the Eurocodes. But of course, we have to recognize that even though we have done the best of our knowledge and the best of we consider correct in order to improve the Eurocodes, will be continuous generating information, will be increasing our knowledge in the complex behavioral structures, in particularly in what regards the seismic behavior. And so we should continue our work, our mission, our research mission in our universities and laboratories in order to generate new knowledge that should be consolidated, simplified, and at the end of the line, introduced in the next generation of Eurocodes. So from the lessons that you have learned from recent earthquakes and natural disasters, please allow me just to share with you a couple of numbers and ideas. According to the global data in what regards the number of natural disasters with important impact in our built heritage and in our constructed areas, we have to say that the number of disasters that are creating impact in our built heritage keeps increasing in terms of number. And if you share these natural disasters according to the type of events, in fact, the earthquakes that belongs or are part of the group of geophysical events are in a group that corresponds to a group not the larger populated group. And we have to recognize that meteorological events are, of course, in terms of number, much more common. In this second plot, I have the evolution in time of the economical impact of those natural disasters with important impact in our society. As you can see, the evolution of the economic impact of those events keeps increasing and keeps increasing in an exponential manner. In fact, those natural disasters are more frequent, but are costing much more. And in the future, we'll see what the future expects to us. In another direction, I would like to say also that from this plot, it is important to highlight that even if the earthquakes are not the more common type of natural disasters, when they occur, they tend to affect larger areas, and at the end of the line, eventually they produce much larger economical impact, and eventually are causing also other effects as mortalities and other types of impacts. We are here among a group of experts in this field of earthquake engineering area, but please allow me to recall that the concept of risk interpreted at the level of a single structure or a city, of a region, of a country, eventually, should be always interpreted as influenced by three main vectors, as the hazard, vulnerability, and exposure. Regarding the hazard, what should I say? That the seismic hazard, in fact, we know it with time better and better because we have a dense monitoring of the planet, and so even though we don't know everything about it, but we keep gaining knowledge and better characterizing the seismic hazard. But we do not have conditions up to now with the knowledge that we have up to now. We don't have conditions to predict when will happen the next event, and where, when, and with which characteristics. For the case of Portugal, according to national and international reports, we recognize that among the main hazards that may affect our country are included the earthquakes and the associated tsunamis. Talking about seismic hazards in Portugal without making a reference to the important event that happened in the 1st of November of 1755, that it was in fact it is recognized as one of the most destructive natural disasters that affected our continent. In fact, the history of Portugal changed in that tragic day. Every time that we assist to an eventual earthquake all over the world in the country, the discussion is restarted again. Okay, and we are normally pushed to answer difficult questions. I mean, we as engineers, we as researchers that are working in the field of seismic engineering. And in fact, we have to recognize that we are not able to estimate or to guess when it will happen next earthquake, but for sure, in the future, that we'll have one or more earthquakes of the same magnitude or even larger than the one that you experienced at the middle of 18th century. Has the second vector of the risk is the vulnerability associated to the better or worse capacity that a building or a building structure have to respond to a certain level of demand. And finally, the exposure, where we try to include the value of our goods, the cultural value, the economical value, but also the number of users of our structure or of our buildings. When we are talking about new structures, of course, from the engineering point of view, we can manage the risk eventually considering the three main vectors that affect the risk. But when we are talking about existing buildings, consolidated cities, our capacity is limited. If you intend to reduce the risk for a certain building or for a certain structure or a certain village or region, we are limited essentially to manage this risk, to reduce this risk, improving the vulnerability, reducing the vulnerability of our buildings. Okay, so looking at this plot where I summarized the impact of the earthquakes that affected in the last 25 years approximately the region corresponding to the south of Europe and extended to Turkey. You see, these are the numbers in terms of loss of life, in terms of homeless people and also families, and also in terms of the economical loss. In fact, those numbers allow me to raise this next question. So are you doing everything well in what regards the engineering approach, or should we keep and eventually increase our attention to the concerns related with seismic safety? Eventually the response is evident. In fact, we should, as society, keep the attention, keep the pressure in order to put more on the table the discussion on the seismic safety of our communities, of our cities, of our buildings, of our regions and countries, in order to somehow reduce the tendency of those numbers to keep increasing in the future. Talking about reinforced concrete buildings and the common causes of damage and eventual collapse, I should say that all the lessons that you learn when you visit a region affected by earthquakes, all that you learn when you read a report from a site visit, tends to give us the common damage that are normally the same. So, and this is a short list of the more common cause of damage. Of course, we understand, you recognize that the aspects related with the detailing of stirrups and hoops, the aspects related with anchors and other detailing concerns may, at the end of the line, produce a structure with better or worse performance. Of course, when you have a structure with insufficient capacity in terms of bending or shear, eventually may have a local or global collapse of our buildings. The joints are a key point. We should say that it's not enough to design and detail properly our main elements, beam, columns, and walls, if you don't take the proper care on the connections. Otherwise, you'll not be able to explore the capacity of the main elements of our structure. Of course, we do know that our structures, eventually our more flexible structures, may experience a poor behavior mechanism controlled by a strong beam we column mechanism. This is very problematic, especially in older structures. The short column mechanism is also a very typical mechanism that you observe in many buildings. Then the irregularities, both in plan and in elevation. We'll have time to discuss in more detail this aspect. And then the interaction in bounding, when we are talking about building structures located in urban areas, the interaction among neighbor buildings could eventually, in some cases, protect the buildings, in other cases, eventually anticipating the damage and collapse. But allow me, please, very simple, to highlight here two main ideas that are extracted from what we keep learning every time that you see regions affected by earthquakes. So, since an important part of the buildings that you have nowadays in our cities were already designed and built following the actual modern codes and eventually the better and more rigorous construction practice, we should say that our modern buildings tend to behave much better, as you expect. The main concern, or one of the major concerns in what regards the seismic vulnerability of our buildings are centered on older buildings that were designed and constructed following the rules and the codes in practice in ancient times, in previous times, okay, with eventually inferior level of demands and exigencies. But please allow me also to refer that even though the modern buildings designed more in the last year will, if it will well designed, well detailed, and well constructed, will tend to behave better. We have also to say that from what we have learned and what we are seeing after what you keep seeing every time that you visit a region affected by earthquakes is that the non-structural elements and eventually as the infills or facade elements may conditionate the behavior and the response of our buildings. Eventually, they can introduce new fragilities in our buildings. This is something that you keep seeing, for example, in this case in Aquila, but among many other examples of regions affected by earthquakes, you see typically that, in fact, our masonry elements, both has interior elements, but also has facade elements, they may be very strong, but those elements are fragile for loading, for when they are loading in plane. But what has really been a big surprise in particularly in these recent earthquakes, for us, for me at least, is the number and the extension of collapses of the elements of the facade for actions out of plane, due to the well-known causes as elements with improper connection to the structure, eventual elements excessively slender, with poor support conditions, with no ties. This is a picture that I normally like to comment because it corresponds to a scenario that you have seen in many places recently, but also here in this case in Aquila, in which we have seen buildings, current buildings, with moderate to practically no damage in the structural system, but with an extensive damage and collapse of the non-structural elements, particularly in the facade. And so this calls our attention to the fact that we should eventually in the future put more attention to the influence, to study these elements and the response of those elements under earthquake demands, and eventually also the influence in the structural response. The short column mechanism is something that is well known, it's very common, has the irregularities induced by a non-uniform distribution of the infill masonry walls, both in plan and in elevation. In this case, in the case of Lorca, the earthquake that affected the south of Spain, you have seen many buildings with this poor seismic response. In fact, we should highlight the well-known concept that even though we are using nowadays more detailed and more rigorous models to simulate the behavior of our building structure, then we have eventually a more or less uniform distribution of the non-structural elements that may at the end of the line affect the seismic response, the changing in the dramatic manner the distribution of the demands in terms of force, internal forces, and or deformations. Please allow me now to jump to Nepal. We had the chance also to study the impact of this quite recent earthquake in Nepal 10 years ago, and among the large number of buildings affected and collapsed. So the reasons behind this poor behavior are well known: poor material, workmanship, irregularities was pretty much present in many of the, as a problem in many of the collapsed buildings. Starting to comment on the current buildings, the buildings that eventually are constructed without a formal design, eventually following the established rules of thumb, but with some changes, some adaptations, with increased number of stories, eventually with a non-regular distribution of the infills in plan and elevation. This may conditionate, as was observed, the behavior and performance of those buildings. But we had also chance to visit some of the buildings formally designed following some codes adopted in the region. For the case of Nepal, the Indian code is quite largely used in the design of the structures. And so in this case, even if the building was properly designed, the influence of the structural system associated with the distribution of the infill masonry walls end up introducing a response controlled globally by torsion, and with this type of poor behavior, with this extensive damage that conditions the use of the building after the earthquake. In 2017, we had also a chance to study the impact of the earthquake that affected the central region of Mexico, and analyzing the buildings affected with collapses or with extensive damage. The same reasons behind this poor behavior: material properties, detailing, and other well-known mechanisms. But allow me to refer that an important number of the buildings that collapsed corresponds to flat slab systems. I don't want to say with this that the problem is the flat slab, even though there are other problems affecting, but in fact, we should give more attention to the design and detailing of buildings with this type of structural elements. Among the causes of the extensive damage observed in Mexico, I would like to say that again, the irregularities was one of the main problems. In fact, particularly in corner buildings, even on this type of very current buildings, even in situations in which the structure was a very regular system, both in plan and elevation, the non-regular distribution of the infills in plan, but also in elevation, but particularly in plan, in these corner buildings in which we have two facades oriented towards the streets and two other facades with full plain infill walls without openings, creating or inducing a response in this, even when the structural system is regular, but this non-uniform, non-regular distribution of the openings in the four facades of the building end up introducing a response dominated by torsion, as you can see in this video. Another aspect that I would like to highlight is that in fact all the elements that are slender, irregular, poor connected, talking about non-structural elements that are not properly connected and attached to the structure, eventually end up performing poor. And this is the type of out-of-plane damage that we have seen extensively in many buildings. Another aspect that for us was captured in this video and is a big concern for us is the eventual poor behavior that heavy non-structural secondary structural element attached to the structure may have if the connection of those elements are not properly designed, detailed, and constructed, accounting for the deformation that the main structural system may induce on those non-structural elements. So from what I have said up to now, I would like to say that even though we recognize that the typical cause of damage or poor behavior are well established, are well known, in many situations, the poor behavior of our buildings end up to being pressed by the influence of infill masonry walls. In fact, we should recognize that we should keep our attention, it should keep the interest and the attention and the research in this line in order to better understand, to better characterize the seismic response of the complex systems that are the buildings, considering the influence of the infill masonry walls. Because in one direction, we recognize that the infill masonry walls may affect in an important manner the response of the building structure and the performance, but also in the other direction, we should say that the seismic response of our main structural system may end up also changing the support and stability conditions of the non-structural elements. Regarding the irregularities in the structural system, what I would like to start to say is that this is a problem that was early recognized. In fact, the first codes, even if they were simple, they all over the world they include at least they point out at least one recommendation or at least one indication that the problem should be attained from the very beginning stage of the design procedure. But even though it is recognized from the first version of our codes, we keep assisting when we're analyzing earthquakes or regions affected by earthquakes, as in Tokyo, in Mexico, we have seen again that it keeps being one of the main reasons of poor performance of our buildings. And in fact, please allow me to comment that in Mexico, already in the year 1985, this strong earthquake that produces a large number of collapses in buildings, one of the main reasons of poor behavior of those buildings was associated to the irregularities both in plan and in elevation. And recently in 2017, as I just commented, again, the same problem. So we do have concern about this problem. We do know the problem, but eventually the tools that you are using for the design, for the detailing, and the type of pressures that you are receiving in the conception, design, and detailing of our buildings are not taking good care of this problem. We did in our research group a comparative analysis of some of the design codes for earthquake demands, all in different parts of the world, and so we have compared the criteria that those codes impose in the evaluation of the irregularities both in plan and in elevation. Very briefly, I would like to highlight that in the majority of the codes, the criteria that are presented for the evaluation of the irregularity are based on typically on qualitative or very simple quantitative rules. For the codes that you have analyzed, in fact, when the structure is classified as irregular, the code itself or different codes restrict the models and methods allowed in design. For force-based design, the codes that we have studied generally reduces the behavior factor allowed, ranging between 10 and 30%, depending on the type of irregularity in planning, elevation, or both. As you know, in this recent revision of Eurocode 8, it was revised, the ductility class. For the case of concrete buildings, the ductility class high was eliminated, and it was introduced an intermediate ductility class between the actual ductility class medium and low. In this revision, the concerns on the torsional flexible systems was kept, the concept of behavior factor was kept, but it was rewritten, making explicitly the contribution for this behavior factor of the capacity of redistribution of the structure, of the overstrength, and finally of the deformation capacity and energy dissipation capacity. In what regards the criteria for the evaluation of the regularity in plan, more generally the criteria were kept, but in what regards the criteria for the evaluation of the regularity in elevation, so some of the rules were adapted passing from qualitative to simple quantitative rules in order to better quantify the level of irregularity. Regarding those new rules, it was reduced slightly the penalties that are associated to the behavior factor for the case of structures irregular in plan. The concept of eccentricity, accidental eccentricity is kept, but instead of being an additional eccentricity, now in this new version is considered as a minimum eccentricity. In this new draft that is under in its final stage of discussion and preparation for final vote, the effect of infill masonry walls in the response of the buildings is densified, the attention that is given to it. In fact, new requirements are introduced for the consideration of the infills, and those new requirements are strongly related with the concerns on an eventual irregular response of the buildings induced by those infill masonry walls. I would like to share with you some case studies that corresponds to buildings recently designed in Portugal, in different parts of the country. We have selected for this study buildings without a very funny and irregular shape, buildings with quite regular structural systems. Those 8 buildings were designed between 18 and 2020, corresponds to buildings with 8 to 12 stories. Only 2 of those buildings has constant story height along the building. Majority of them has pronounced important change in terms of story height in the first stories. All the buildings were designed and constructed with flat slabs and has vertical elements reinforced with concrete walls with some columns. 5 of those 8 buildings were designed according to Eurocode 8, but 3 of them were designed according with our former national code. So, doing the classification of those building structural systems according to Eurocode 8, just to say that all of them were classified as wall systems with a relative ratio between frame and total lateral stiffness less than 6%. 7 out of the 8 structures were classified as torsional flexible. Classifying those 8 buildings in terms of regularity in plan, following the actual version of Eurocode 8 and the second generation, all of them were classified as irregular in plan for both directions, according to both documents. In what regards the irregularity or regularity in elevation, 7 out of them were classified as irregular. In fact, those results of those 8 buildings selected with some criteria to be a more regular building in terms of geometry end up with the results that I just shared with you. In fact, this allows us to put a couple of questions. First, are the structures really, are the regular structures common? Eventually not. Eventual regular structures, they are very nicely presented in our textbooks, but in reality, will not find regular structures according to the concepts that you are adopting in our code. So, and this allows us to put another question: should we really keep in the future versions of the codes worldwide the classification of the regularity as a binary classification, or should we eventually introduce at least one additional irregularity level? This is a thing. This is a comment that eventually should motivate some research lines in the future. And also another direction, consider the importance that the regular or irregular response may have in the performance of our buildings. Eventually, we should consider and put to ourselves the following question: should we really keep this approach in a way that you are treating the regularity with the level of rigor that you are adopting in our codes, or should we really eventually densify the criteria and introduce new criteria eventually from a point of view more rigorous that allow us to better classify this important parameter. In what regards the infill response or influence of the response of our buildings, just to highlight what we already know, in fact, we know that even with slight infills, those infills may affect lateral stiffness, strength, may change natural frequencies, vibration modes of our buildings, may affect the energy capacity dissipation of our buildings, and not less important, may induce eventually a brittle behavior of part or the overall structure. Allow me please to comment very briefly the main outputs of one of the topics under a project, an European project run already a few years ago. Under this project called ICONS, developed in ELSA laboratory of the GRC Center. Under this ICONS project, two similar planar frames were tested for lateral loads, were tested with pseudodynamic methodology. Those frames were designed and built following the current practice of the past of the 70s, 80s in Southern European region. Though the building structure was designed only for vertical loads plus wind, and then it was assessed for earthquake demands with increasing magnitude of the ground motion. Artificially generated and imputed to the structure using this, adopting this pseudodynamic strategy. So the two similar structures, one was tested without infills and the other with infills with this type of slight ceramic clay bricks, okay, with more than 60% of voids, with the distribution that you can see here in the image on the right. So the first structure without infills was tested for different earthquakes. As you can see, it was already clear for the first earthquake demand that it was a tendency for the concentration of larger interstory drift in the first story that was magnified in the second earthquake, and then the test was stopped in order to avoid full collapse of the structure. For the structure with infills, in fact, that irregularity at the third story was completely hidden. The infill masonry wall somehow tends to protect the structure for the first levels of seismic demands, but when the infill masonry walls collapse in a fragile manner at the first story, end up creating or inducing a soft story at this level with very limited level of interstory drift demands in the upper stories. Comparing the global base shear versus interstory drift at the ground story, as you can see, the infill masonry walls in fact increased initial stiffness up to 10 times, the maximum capacity increased between 3 and 4 times, and as you can see, the fragile manner in which the infill masonry walls collapse induced a global, very fragile response of at this story level and consequently of the structure itself. As numerical case studies, I would like to share with you here 3 buildings that we have been densely studied in Portugal, 2 of them located in the north of Portugal, here in Porto, and the third one located in Lisbon. Those buildings were designed and constructed in the 50s. Those 2 buildings located in Porto, which is corresponds to a region with low seismicity, per coincidence have a more regular distribution of infills in height than this third case study located in Lisbon, with this pronounced irregularity in height due to the existence of a floor at the base without infills. So, as strategy, those buildings were studied with analysis of the blueprints available, with all the details confronted with reality in the buildings. Then we have measured and natural frequencies and modes, and finally we had calibrated our models of the buildings with infills. Then with the models calibrated, we have been playing, activating and deactivating the infills, analyzing their influence in the response. In fact, for those 2 buildings that corresponds to regular structures with regular distribution of infills, As you can see, in fact, the infills tend somehow for the lower levels of earthquake demands to protect the structure, but when they break, they tend to collapse in a fragile manner, and so the soft story mechanism suddenly starts to be implemented in the building response. For the third case study, this building even eventually don't need even a single calculation. It is very predictable how this type of structure tends to behave. But for this case, as you can see, and comparing the response of that building that corresponds to a regular structure with a very irregular distribution of infills, particularly in high, in fact, comparing the response of the structure without infills and with infills, as you can see, the deformation in demand in the upper stories is practically zero, is very, very low. While the larger concentration of demands for the structure without infills tend to be concentrated, of course, in the lower stories. And when you compare the same structure for the same input in terms of earthquake demand, activating the infills may eventually protect large part of the structure in the upper story, but will tend to develop pretty much larger deformations in the ground story when you compare with the structure analyzed without infills. And we're talking about a difference of eventually 2 times for a specific type of earthquake demands. But talking about local deformation in terms of ductility demand in the column base, eventually for this case study, we have determined and estimated a difference of 3 times. So the infills, in fact, for specific structures as this case, tends to produce a much larger demand in terms of interstory drift and ductility demand in some specific regions. Here in the Faculty of Engineering of the University of Porto, we have keep attention to this problem of the autoplane behavior, and so we have installed here in our labs a platform to test full-scale infill masonry panels, and you have up to now developed a series of tests studying the influence of these different parameters as a type of bricks, type of masonry, quality of workmanship, type of support, type of connection, and so on. We have also studied the influence of an eventual minor damage in plane in the out-of-plane behavior and capacity of those infill masonry walls. We also studied and validated different techniques to improve the seismic performance and of those infill masonry walls out of plane. And basically, what we have confirmed in the tests that we have done up to now is that with simple and economic solutions, introducing, for example, a net within the plaster, eventually we may increase the capacity, out of plane capacity of our walls. Energy dissipation capacity can be also largely improved, but not less important, eventually can prevent collapse and therefore prevent the potential casualties that may result from the collapse of those facade infill masonry walls. So, for the case of Portugal, but also in other regions of Europe, we should recognize that a large part of our building stock corresponds to buildings made of reinforced concrete structural systems. Those buildings, in those buildings lives an important part of our population. Most of those buildings were constructed without concerns in what regards the energy comfort or thermal requirements that we have in our actual regulations. And so we have now a tremendous, a very good opportunity to use this recognized energy poverty in an important society, in our society, especially in particular in the older generation that are using older buildings, typically older houses. Eventually, we should take this opportunity to improve the conditions of those houses, but trying to explore solutions that combine the energy retrofitting of those buildings with the seismic retrofitting of those structures, of those in particular, of those elements in the facade. And so we have been studying also the common solutions applied in the energy retrofitting of those buildings, and you have proved that with a very, very minor investment, eventually changing the type of net that you are using in those energy retrofitting solutions, with practically very limited investment, we may improve in an important manner the energy deformation capacity, the lateral deformation capacity in terms of the out-of-plane behavior and response of those systems. Okay, so to conclude, just to say that if you analyze what you have been doing in terms of the structural systems that you have been adopting in our current buildings, when you start using the reinforced concrete solution or technique, we start mainly adopting a solution frames, but then with the increasing of demand in our codes, actually we are building essentially wall systems or practically wall systems. And this evolution we have started a couple of decades ago of adopting flat slabs. Nowadays, most of our structures are built with flat slabs, and due to different reasons, our construction sector is pressed to introduce more and more precast elements in the construction of the overall structure or of parts of the structure. And so the evolution was somehow slow. In what regards the evolution of the solutions that you have been adopting in our current buildings for the non-structural elements, the evolution was continuously. In fact, due to the pressure of thermal demands, more exigent due to the pressure demands also in terms of acoustic and other demands, we have been changing continuously the solutions that we are adopting in the construction of our buildings. In what regards construction practice, I would like to highlight that we understand a certain inconsistency in the approach and in the detail that you put in the detailing and construction attention of the structural system when you compare with the non-structural system and elements. In fact, in many situations, sometimes you find we receive in the construction sites eventual architectural drawings, but without technical details that recommend and that guide the options taken in construction site for the installation of these non-structural elements, something that eventually should discuss and improve in the future. And so we should recognize that all the decisions that you are taking from this conception towards until passing for the design phase, detailing, and in construction will always at the end of the line determine the better or worse seismic behavior and performance that our buildings will have in future earthquakes. So regarding the costs, just a simple comment to say that we recognize that our common buildings has a partial cost considering the foundations plus structural system when compared with the total cost, total investment in construction of our building, that actually, at least for the case of Portugal, represents less than 1/3 of the total cost of the building. And the tendency is that this fraction of the cost to be reduced, because in fact our buildings are becoming more and more complex systems. You are increasing layers and layers of infrastructures that press the partial cost of the structure plus foundation to reduce. So very briefly to say that in fact does not compensate to try to save money in our structural system. I said before that at least in Portugal, but also in other parts of the south of Europe, we recognize that there is enormous pressure in order to reintroduce in the construction design and in construction practice the precast elements or fully precast structures. So here is just a concern that you have. In fact, you need really this strategy to attend the large demand of buildings that you need in our society for the housing problem we are experiencing now. But we should not leave the industry alone. We should put our knowledge, our expertise, our laboratories, our universities in supporting this industry in order to develop solutions that can attend the requirements you have just said, but that will not and that should not introduce new vulnerabilities. One of the techniques that are gaining more and more attention of society is the 3D printing for construction of eventually small buildings. And in fact, again, we should also not leave our colleagues from architecture, our construction, our builders alone. We should put our expertise in support of the developing, detailing, and construction of these new solutions. As final remarks, just to say that we should recognize that all international codes include in the first pages simple principles and recommendations that you should attend from the engineering point of view in order to promote better seismic performance. But then we have the infill masonry walls that in many situations may somehow conditionate this behavior. International codes, as the case of Eurocode 8, allow us in design to explore high levels of ductility. But then you have the infill masonry walls that may somehow limit the capacity of exploration of the ductility in parts of our structure or eventually all the structure. So our code tends to have a dense list of rules, recommendations, and verifications for the structural elements, but then for the infill masonry walls, eventually the level of the development is not at the same level. So there is also here a kind of inconsistency that you should push for in the future, densifying eventually our codes with procedures or strategies that may help the designer in order to promote structures that will be less vulnerable, not just in terms of structural system, but also considering the influence that the infill masonry walls may have. We should recognize that the seismic design of any structure, but also of buildings, is a complex iterative procedure. From the design perspective, we should account for a large list of requirements, details, verifications. But there are two aspects that I would like to highlight here in this lesson: the irregularities and also the infills. The influence that infills may have in the response and in the performance of our buildings should never be misregarded, both when you are designing a new structure or when you are assessing an existing structure. We should recognize that our society is increasing the level of demands in terms of the performance in different perspectives of each construction element, each construction product, but also in the space that you are constructing or adapting in our existing buildings. And so all this long list of requirements is very, very important to recognize. And you should be more demanding and more exigent in the future in terms of thermal insulation, energy performance, acoustic comfort, muster, fire safety, and so on, so on. But the solutions that you are conceiving, designing, detailing, and installing in our buildings should for sure attend that long list of requirements, but should never go against the adequate safety. So with this, I would like to conclude, thanking you all for your attention. I will be here available for any question if the audience have.
Thank you, Professor. It was a very interesting and comprehensive presentation. So I believe that you're a little tight with time, so I'm gonna give an opportunity for a short discussion. And I believe that we have a perfect candidate to ask you about the infill walls. So he knows who I'm talking
Yes,
about.
yes.
Please.
In any case, I'll be more than happy to answer any question you have. If you don't have time today, eventually I'll be more than happy to interact with you later on. But please go ahead.
Okay, I will start first. Thanks, Vladimir, for introduction, and thank you for Professor Varum for your presentation. So for me, one of the things that is kind of a highlight was, I think maybe in 1/3 of your presentation, you said something, I will paraphrase and you correct me if I'm wrong. You said something like, we can handle the design and let's say the concrete structures and we know how to design them, okay, with some plus and minus, but the infills are the problem, more or less. I mean, that was in one slide that I paraphrased. And that's for me, kind of, let's say, I would say sad or also in some way, maybe it could be strange for some people who are not, let's say, experts or not civil engineers, because there is one non-structural element that we say it's non-structural that is making so much trouble for the whole structure. So there is decades of research in construction, in concrete structures, let's say, and design of them and modeling of them, and we can do that. But for the infill, still, there's no, at least in everyday practice, the good solution. And then all the problems that you mentioned, the causes and the, let's say, critical aspects of the infills and interaction with the structure. And then what's your opinion? What should be the solution? What should be the direction? So one is, okay, to design it, but still, in the codes, there are several aspects taken into account, but it's difficult to take all of them, and there's always a lot of uncertainties. So what is your general
Wonderful.
opinion? What should be the direction?
Marco, wonderful question. In fact, the concern about the infill masonry walls, the importance that they have eventually in changing the response of our building, in changing the distribution of demands in our building, the change in terms of the structural of the properties of our building system in structure plus non-structural elements, is something that is not a new discovery. So the first models that were proposed in the literature to account for the infill masonry walls in the response of buildings last from the 50s, mid-50s and 60s, eventually 60s, I'm sorry. So something that is recognized. All that you have seen, what you are seeing every time you visit the region of active earthquakes, it is quite clear. It's very clear for everyone that, in fact, the infill masonry walls may affect in an important manner the response of our buildings. So this is something that is not a new discovery, something that is recognized since
70 years ago.
very early ages of the earthquake engineering development. But when we are talking about these modern buildings made with a reinforced concrete system, but we have also to recognize that the level of difficulty to deal with the infill masonry walls, when you compare with the difficulty and with the uncertainty that you have in dealing with the seismic response of a structural system, is a different world. So the diversity of products in the infills, the influence of the workmanship, the detailing, the different of geometry. So the level of complexity is much higher. And of course, this is one of the reasons why our codes are still do not have the level of detail that you dream and you like to have in our design. Say that, recognizing that, what we have to say is that we should never ignore it. The problem exists, the problem is recognized, it's a difficult problem to be approached, but we should not ignore it. We should not ignore it in design. You should do the best that you can. What you have seen in these recent earthquakes highlights even more the problem, because you are designing and building better structures with more concern in all the details that you have in the design, with more rigorous approach in construction sites. So our structures tend to have better behavior. But then we have the non-structural elements that eventually also with the demands from architecture, from our very nicer modern architecture that is pushing us to more complex geometries. We are introducing new materials, new solutions, many of them conceived without concern on the earthquake demand. So what we have assisted in these last earthquakes is that you are somehow introducing, or in many situations you may be introducing new vulnerabilities in our building associated to this, call it non-structural elements. Okay, so something that, in brief, as Marco has you referred, the problem exists, is recognized, is very complex. We should keep our attention in all the engineering act in order to do our best of our knowledge, our best with the tools that you have in your hands, in order to consider, of course, always in the simple manner, the influence of the infills in the response and in the safety of our structures, both new or existent. And from to the universities, to the academia, we should not relax. We should put our attention in the topic. You should eventually densify the work that you are doing in this field in order to generate a consolidated, more consolidated knowledge that may in the future allow us to improve the level of details or suggestions for the designers in order to contribute to a safer world in terms of
Yeah.
in terms of the vulnerability of our buildings.
Yeah, thanks for your answer. I think this end, what you said at the end was let's say one of the main points, that designers in the practice, they seek for a solution, they need the solution, but more or less they don't have it on the table. And then in practice, yeah, usually they neglect all these issues that infills cause because they don't have, let's say, clear, straightforward solution. And that's what you said correctly. We should all work to derive it and hopefully offer it. But thanks for your answer. I have a lot of other questions, but I think I will have a chance with you to discuss it in person, and I would like to give the word to the others if they have some questions too.
Thank you, Marco.
Any other questions from the audience?
In any case, Vladimir, I'll be more than happy to share some ideas with the audience. You can share my contact with all the audience, and we'll be more than happy to interact with you.
That's perfect. So I guess it's time for us to let you go because you have other plans. Thank you very much. Thank you sincerely for your time to participate in this set of lectures, and we hope to see you next time in person in Serbia to host
It
it.
will be my pleasure. It will be my pleasure to have this opportunity to visit you.
So thank you. Have a nice day and all the best.
Thank you for your invitation and all the best to everyone.
Thank you.